I had a conversation about flying saucers some years ago with laymen. Because I'm scientific, I know all about flying saucers. So I said, I don't think there are flying saucers. So my antagonist said, is it impossible that there are flying saucers? Can you prove that it's impossible? I said, no, I can't prove it's impossible. It's just very unlikely. That, they say, you are very unscientific. If you can't prove it impossible, then how can you say it's likely, that it's unlikely? Well, that's the way, that is scientific. It is scientific only to say what's more likely and less likely, and not to be proving all the time possible and impossible. To define what I mean, I finally said to him, listen, I mean that from my knowledge of the world that I see around me, I think that it is much more likely that the reports of flying saucers are the result of the known irrational characteristics of terrestrial intelligence rather than the unknown rational efforts of extraterrestrial intelligence. I had a...
So there you go. As smart as Richard Feynman was, he was wrong. There are flying saucers. And we have to go along with the evidence, and a lot of evidence has been accumulated. So here's the PowerPoint that was leaked to the CTV network, and it's called Sky Canada Project. And they're using the UAP term, which Hillary Clinton first wanted to use in the fall of 2015. I believe it came from Great Britain. They decided to change the name from UFOs to UAP. Who is compiling and analyzing UAP observations made by Canadians? That seems to be the focus. And sort of like they're going to advise us how to do ufology, and they're going to figure out. There are not that many researchers in Canada. No, it's not like the United States. There are very, very few. This presentation was done in February of 2023. That was after Larry McGuire went in front of the House of Commons and asked, and this was after the balloon shoot down thing, which sort of, I guess they figured the iron was hot, let's go now. Okay, so the first slide they have is definition and objectives. Again, they're using a UAP, the Sky Canada, to inquire how UAP reporting is managed in Canada and to recommend improvements if necessary. The objectives identify the key Canadian players and how they deal with UAP observations. I'm not sure whether they're talking about ufologists or whether they're talking about scientists, because scientists really don't deal with it, and there are very few UFO researchers. Compare the Canadian approach with some of the G7 country systems. That will be interesting after my lecture, because I will show that our approach is to do it scientifically, and the American approach was to use the threat narrative. And when I insisted, and one of the parliamentary assistants insisted that the Canadians wanted to stick just to science, one of the key US people said, that's the poison pill, I'm gone. And that, it all collapsed. It was like, we're not doing science, and there's a whole different narrative as to what I think the Americans are doing compared to what the Canadians are doing. So I was very optimistic when this thing first started that the Canadians were actually going to do a scientific investigation of UFOs, but that's not what the science office is going to do. And then the scary part is prepare for potential collaboration with current US initiatives on UAPs. And as I said, we went down that road, and we are on totally different pages. And when we basically stated, or when they got the idea that we weren't going to do what they weren't going to influence what we did, but until we did what they told us to do, they weren't going to help us. Pointed out to the people on the other side, we don't have military witnesses. The committees in Canada are not allowed to spend money. They have no power. They, not like the United States, the three branches of government. I could not get across to them how the Canadian government worked, but it all broke down. But there is a completely different view of how things are handled in the United States and in Canada. And this is the clarification. This is when I started to realize this thing may not be going where I thought it was going to go. It is not meant to access or collect firsthand data. So I don't know whether they're going to, watch people or, tell us what to do or what, tap our phones or like what's the deal? I mean, if we're not going to investigate UFOs, what are we going to do? Investigate the UFO researchers is not meant to transform the office of the chief scientist, science advisor of Canada to the Prime Minister as the main point of contact for Canadians wanting to report observations. So not going to collect data, then you're not going to be able to send it to the Canadian government, is not meant to prove or deny the existence of extraterrestrial life or extraterrestrial visitors. And I think that's pretty clear that they want to stay, as scientists want to stay clear of that, because they all still have, they may not have their tenure yet, and they may, have their reputations to protect. So they want to stay away from the alien thing. They want to sort of make it this nebulous UAP thing that we're not going to gather material on. Or this is what when I saw this, I started to wonder, like, what are we actually going to be doing here? The motivation, supports citizen science. Well, that's already been going on for many years already. I don't think they really have to, unless they're going to provide some grants, which I don't think they're going to do, collect observations to document rare natural phenomena. Respond to an official request. Now that they did do, there was an official request, and that's what I had stated that should happen, because there was this discussion, and I said, if Larry Maguire wanted an investigation, he has to stand up in the House of Commons. That's how it works in Canada, is you stand up and you can ask anybody a question. You can ask the Prime Minister. I have a question for the Prime Minister. Same as it works in Britain. And you can demand the President or the Prime Minister answer a question on UFOs. Why haven't you done anything? What are you doing? And so that's what Larry Maguire did. He went into the Parliament and he requested that comprehensive study being done on UAPs in Canada, and the government took him up on it, because Larry Maguire is in the opposition party. He's not a member of the ruling party. More transparency. This is kind of a funny one. More transparency. So one of the motivations is to give access to collected information to prevent conspiracy theories. And that is just bizarre, because this PowerPoint presentation is not public. It was leaked through an anonymous source to the CTV network. And that's how this thing got out. So number one suggestion to the Canadian government on my behalf is, if you want more transparency and you want less conspiracy theories, quit leaking PowerPoint presentations anonymously to media sources. Be upfront, put your PowerPoint out there and tell people what you're going to do, and not hide it through anonymous sources. National security. Support surveillance activities within Canadian territories to prevent undetected intrusions. Now, this partly came from the fact that these 3 balloons were sort of went over some of the parts of Canadian territory, and it's sort of like we have to sort of do this surveillance thing where we're going to spend all sorts of money, and we're going to take little kids science fair projects and take 2 $400,000 missiles and shoot down any balloon that goes by, and this is a lot of money. Now, unless this is going to come from the Defense Department, which it would have to, which is exactly where I understood the Canadians weren't going to go. They weren't going to go to the defense thing. But it's this idea that we have to sort of protect our airspace, and it's a threat to our airspace. And I would like to remind the Canadians, the Americans, whoever, it's not your airspace. We stole it from the Indians. We came here. It's not our airspace. We are custodians of the airspace. We're here to take care of the airspace. It is not our airspace. We're only here for a few years, and then we're gone. And 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, somebody else will take over the country, and it'll be their airspace. Nobody owns the airspace. And if anybody owns it, it should be taken care of and monitored. And if anybody owns it, it's the intelligence that's been here for 1,000 years. So if it's first come, first served, they've always had the airspace. And if we want to get away from interactions and intrusions and accidents, we should just stay out of their airspace if that's the game you want to play. Prepare for collaboration, proactively review and describe the Canadian approach to best discuss practices with the United States. Now, hopefully they're open up front, and we see whether they're going to talk, because we heard some of the witnesses. We heard one witness I've never heard identified before in one of the discussions that was going on. And you bet I'm going to be pushing to have that person, if the Canadians talk to that guy, as to what we're going to share with the Americans and what the Americans are going to share with the Canadians. And best practices, are this best practices going to be along this the rules of science, or are they going to be on the rules of building military weapons? In the media recently, so this is some of the things that have inspired the whole thing. December 2017, the New York Times article, the 3 videos declassified by the Pentagon in 2020. I'd like to remind the Canadians that they were actually basically stolen from the Pentagon in 2017, and they can say whatever they want. They were declassified. That's like saying, I'm the president of the United States and I like the Resolute desk. It's not classified, so I'm taking it with me when I go. Everything belongs to the government. You don't, because it's declassified doesn't mean you can grab the videos when you leave your job and walk off. So they may have been declassified in 2017, but these 3 videos that everybody's heard about were first gotten out of the Pentagon. And that's always been a question of mine. How did they get them out of the Pentagon if they didn't own the videos? Larry Maguire asked the question. Good for Larry Maguire. He got this thing going, and I'll always give him credit that he had, I didn't realize he had other members of parliament that he was actually sort of keeping up to speed on this whole thing. He's never had a sighting, but he's interested in the subject. And so all this initiative, the Canadian initiative to really get this thing going again, is Larry Maguire, and hopefully he can keep this thing to science and not get into the whole threat narrative and another enemy, and they're going to eat us, and all this slide 9 stuff that you see in the American media. 4 unauthorized flying objects were shot down by NORAD air forces. And if we get into that, of starting to shoot down anything that we can't immediately identify, I think we're going down the wrong road. Here's another slide. Recent U.S. initiatives. This is this new office that they have created to synchronize efforts across U.S. federal departments to detect and identify objects of interest in or near military installations. And I think basically what this is to get all the material back under control, but it's still all going to be classified, as I've pointed out many times. Because people are testifying in front of Congress in SCIFs does not mean that it is going to be released to the public, because if you go down the road of national security, everything is going to be top secret and you have no need to know. Public does not need to know. NASA study, which I think was initiated. I have an FOIA in with the Office of Science and Technology Policy in the United States. They tried to walk it around the first time, and it ended up that I would write five or six FOIAs with one word, and still haven't heard back. But I think that's what happened, is that John Podesta, from what James Fox stated, John Podesta was going to ask President Biden to get an investigation done through the OSTP. Now, that's what the Canadians are supposed to be doing here, from my understanding, is that you have this science office. The science advisor to the Prime Minister is running a study. The Office of Science and Technology Policy is the science advisor to the President of the United States. So what we had heard was, according to James Fox, that Podesta was going to go to Biden, and he was going to get Biden to get a study to be done by the OSTP, the science advisor to the President of the United States. Now, when Bill Clinton was president, that is where the investigations were taking place, and that's where it should take place, in the whole science aspect. And that's where the Roswell reports came from the U.S. Air Force. People always sort of assume the U.S. Air Force went back and did 2 Roswell studies, one in 1994, one in 1997, and they went back and investigated Roswell. The only reason they investigated Roswell because Lawrence Rockefeller was in the White House, and he was really to put a full-page ad in every newspaper in the United States demanding that Bill Clinton identify what he knows about UFOs, and they had to do what he wanted. They said, give us one case that we can investigate, and we will get there, and then we'll go after the other cases. And he said, okay, I want you to reinvestigate Roswell. It was because the Office of Science and Technology Policy requested that study that their Air Force had to go out and do Roswell again. That's the last thing they wanted to do, was go and investigate Roswell. So that's where I think this NASA study may have come up. is that this came from because they are under the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So they have a 9-month study starting October 2022 to examine how UAP data is being reported by civilian, commercial, and other organizations. Bravo to the people down in Florida and Texas. The Galileo project is an investigation, but I think it's more looking at outside the Earth on civilization, extraterrestrial technology civilizations, looking almost like the SETI type thing. But it is an initiative, and a lot of the top researchers in the United States have been part of this, so we may get something from that. So as you can see, I mean, from all this stuff has already happened. And for Canada to go back and start in 1947, I think is kind of a waste of time, that there's a lot of stuff in place already and a lot of organizations that have tried to tackle this problem. So here's what they put. Now, this is not an official PowerPoint, but they're in the investigation stage right now. Share your organization's experience. So I would hope that they would put this out to the handful of UFO researchers in Canada as to how it works. My approach would be to listen to the experiencers, not to spend so much time on UFO sightings. We've done that for 80 years. It has not got us anywhere, especially if you get the idea that UFOs can morph themselves, they can change as they move around. The idea that we're going to study what they look like and their colors, and that's going to tell us anything. It's almost like you go back to 1896. Is Canada going to go back to 1895, 1896, where there was wooden ships flying around with propellers and balloons and big giant lights on them and stuff like that? UFOs have changed over the years. They change from one thing to another. They morph, and we have to go to the people who are actually interacting with the intelligence. Now, whether they're going to do that, I think scientifically that's sort of like a poison pill as well. They don't really want to go there. They consider that anecdotal stories. They would rather go with anecdotal stories of UFO sightings in the sky. It's all anecdotal, but the people that are going to tell us what's going on are the people that are actually interacting with this intelligence, and there's a lot of them, and they have a lot of material to share. Where should witnesses report their observations? Well, we'll see where they go with that. There are no, unless the government sets up something where there are no major organizations. Chris Rakowski gathers stuff here in Winnipeg, but unless they're going to provide funding and this sort of thing, are they going to expect that one researcher or one club is going to start gathering all the material? And the other problem that you have with the witness reports is that in Canada, if you know how it works, the population is pretty clear in 3 different spots: Quebec, Toronto, and Vancouver. And so in Toronto, you're going to have the most sightings because there's so many people there and so many things flying around there, and there are more researchers than anywhere else. But if you go to Saskatchewan or Prince Edward Island or Newfoundland, you're really going to get no sightings because there's really no researchers and nobody to report to. So this will be interesting to see where they go with these observations, because in order for someone to collect the observations, somebody needs some money. You can't expect people to do this job and just have the Canadian government look over your shoulder and tell you what to do. Do you have equipment that collects information on activities in the sky? As far as I know, I don't think there's anybody in Canada that has that. Again, this involves a lot of money. I have a friend, Bob McGuire, who has set up stuff. Chris O'Brien has some stuff set up in the Colorado, Utah area for observation. This is money. This is stuff that we're going to reinvent the wheel here. This stuff's already been done, and but it's not being done in Canada. Do you have highly qualified personnel that could support and the efforts to interpret what's going on? We'll see. How many UAP observations are reported in Canada every year? Again, this comes down to, are we going to count lights in the sky, or are we going to talk to people who are actually interacting with the phenomena? I think what you're going to find is, because science is just deathly afraid of experiencer reports, We're just going to try to do the nuts and bolts thing, that this is a physical phenomenon that is reproducible and it will do the same thing all the time. And we're gonna figure this thing out by watching lights in the sky, and then we're gonna capture one of these things and grab the little engine out of it, and then we're gonna, make lots of money and have free energy, and everybody's gonna live happily ever after. As far as I know, after 48 years of working on this, that ain't happening. Where the UAP observations reported, again, I said it's going to be Toronto, it's going to be Quebec, and it's going to be the Vancouver coastal area. Other than that, there's really no people in Canada. Maybe Alberta, there's a couple of major centers there, but Canada's pretty spread out. What information is provided and requested. We already have the report. They could just go back to the Project Second Story report. They have all and Project Magnet had reporting questionnaires that were handed out. They could use that. We're going to redo this whole thing. We're going to start all over again, and we're going to waste some more taxpayer money and some more time. And I'm actually very let down by what I've seen is going to happen here. It's just basically they're going to come into the UFO community and sort of tell us how to do business. What is done with the collected information? Pray to God it ain't given to the black ops. That's the last thing we need. It should be a civilian thing, and it should answer who are these people, why are they here, and what is the message? Because you can see the thing with the nuclear weapons and with all sorts of other stuff, they seem to have a message that if this thing goes to the black ops, you're never going to hear the full report of what's going on. We've got enough weapons, we've got enough killing, we need some science done, and we need some information collected that doesn't go into the black world where it's all classified. Is there a follow-up with individuals reporting observations? There has been for 80 years. We're just reinventing the wheel here. There's all this stuff's been done there, and people have spent a lot of time and money and filed all this stuff. I have Stanton Friedman's files that are going to take, they figure, up to 10 years and he collected all this stuff. It's at the university in New Brunswick. Anybody can go there. I've put a lot of this stuff online, and a lot of this material I gave all this stuff to Larry McGuire, and I gave this stuff. They've got all the Stanton Friedman files that I did, which was maybe 50,000 pages, and I was only there for a week. There's probably millions of pages of material that can be collected there. So who's going to go and gather all that material? This has all been done. I provided thousands of pages of the official Project Magnet stuff, all Wilbur Smith's files, which was actually held at the University of Ottawa. So Mona Nemer comes, she was the head of research at the University of Ottawa in Canada's nation's capital. That's where Wilbur Smith's files are. And I've got all the files. They didn't think I should have them. Someone went in there and got them, and I've got them, and I've made them public online. Anybody can get them from me. I can give you access to these files. All the sighting reports are there. All this stuff is there. And we're going to do this all over again. It's like throw all Wilbur Smith stuff out, throw out the millions of pages that Stanton Friedman had, and let's start all over again. Let's gather UFO sightings, and let's do this kind of stuff. Was there a different approach in the past? Yeah, exactly. And hopefully they do this historical perspective. I wrote a whole book on this whole subject about what happened in the early Canadian past. McGuire has this material. This material can be made public to anybody who wants it. The Stanton Friedman material, with a couple of people going down there, we can get that material. But unless somebody's going to start working on this stuff, we can gather all the sightings. It's like collecting stamps. We can do this till Jesus comes marching back for the second time, and nothing's going to change. We have to start talking to people who are interacting, who are getting messages from whatever this phenomena is that we are dealing with. Any suggestions to improve collection and analysis? Just let's not do the same thing over again. It's just like, no, it's people have this material, and a lot of people have spent a lot of time. Here's the timetable for, this is the last slide, then I'll shut it down. This is the timetable. I was optimistic about. Start of the project, I knew, because we had the panel was going to happen in August of last year. And when that panel fell apart, that's when Larry McGuire went onto the floor of the House of Commons and asked for the study. And I give full credit to the Prime Minister and to the science advisor that they actually put their head above the fray and actually agreed to do the project. So they started the project winter, spring, collecting information. I don't know what they're collecting or who they're collecting from. I haven't really heard anything other than getting this leaked PowerPoint presentation. Fall, there's a draft report for internal discussion. And then this is the best thing about the whole thing is the final report will be made public. And hopefully all the material will be made public because I've already started to file all the access to information requests. All this material, I'm going to put great pressure. I know where some of this, what the material they've been given, and make sure that all this material is made public for people in Canada and people in the United States to scientifically investigate this phenomena, which I say is the Super Bowl of all stories. It is a very important story, and let's not mess it up by starting all over again and starting to do the UFO sighting thing. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you down the road.